Last month, I sat down with a founder in Palo Alto, and just 3 years ago, this guy was completely obsessed with disrupting social media, optimizing ad spend. When I saw him this time, he wasn't looking at a screen. He was staring at this old weathered topographical map of the Susquehanna River. And he's tracing a red circle around the dormant cooling powers of 3 Mile Island. He didn't look like a software engineer anymore. His eyes had this manic, restless energy, the kind you see on wartime logistics officers. He didn't want to show me a new UI, no pitch deck. Instead, he pulls up this grainy video on his phone. It's not a new app. It's a 3D printing nozzle at the University of Maine. And it's laying down this high-density composite for a reactor vessel. He just whispered with this kind of reverent intensity, "This is the only code that matters now." He told me he completely divested from the cloud. To him, the internet we use is a mediocre entropy trap, a shared decaying cage where innovation dies in a pile of regulatory paperwork. He talked about the public power grid not as a service, but as a civilizational suicide pact. He wasn't interested in reaching users anymore. He was interested in capturing photons and splitting atoms. What really struck me, though, was the sudden cold shift in his tone when I brought up AI safety. He didn't argue. He didn't talk about ethics or bias. He just laughed. And then he said something that was genuinely chilling. You can't regulate a black hole, and a gigawatt-scale cluster with its own dedicated nuclear core is exactly that, a sovereign jurisdiction that answers only to the laws of physics. That transition from software eating the world to this gritty, territorial obsession with energy sovereignty, that's the heartbeat of 2026. We are watching a great decoupling. The world's most powerful minds are no longer trying to fix the grid. They're building a way to leave it behind forever. It raises a question that should make us all a little uneasy. What happens to the rest of us when the most advanced intelligence on Earth goes completely off-grid? Okay, let's unpack this. We've been tracing the trajectory of this shift, and it's all driven by this singular, intense idea, the thermodynamic imperative. Our mission today is to dive deep into how the world's most energy-intensive industries are turning to nuclear power, specifically small modular reactors, SMRs, to achieve what they call compute sovereignty. We need to understand why, for so many of these leaders, the old debates about safety and regulation have just become completely irrelevant.
And what's fascinating here is that this is not just about finding cheap power. It's not an economic calculation. It's a fundamental architectural redesign. It's about building a separate, hyper-reliable energy and compute system outside of the legacy grid. This deep dive shows us the economic, the technical, and the intensely ideological forces that are making this decoupling inevitable. This is a $1.5 trillion investment opportunity being unlocked. The core strategy is the vertical integration of these SMRs, these nuclear co-location projects, as the main infrastructure for achieving AI compute sovereignty and ultimately energy superabundance, all in the face of what they see as crippling regulatory stagnation.
Before we get into the technicals, the megawatts and the dollars, we have to understand the worldview. It's almost a religious conviction driving this. It's this idea that software can no longer eat the world alone and must now consume energy. That links directly to this concept, the thermodynamic imperative.
That phrase, the thermodynamic imperative, is really the central doctrine here. It redefines the entire purpose of intelligence. In this worldview, the universe is governed by the second law of thermodynamics, entropy, disorder. It always increases. Intelligence exists for one reason: to capture and utilize energy in a ceaseless war against that entropy. So expanding energy capture is essentially the only objective moral good.
Every act of progress, then, every bit of complex civilization is just a little pocket of order that we create by burning through energy.
Exactly. So if intelligence is just a process of turning low entropy energy into high entropy heat and data,
then the more energy you capture, the more successful your civilization is. It's a complete reboot of what success even looks like.
And this philosophy, you see it associated with effective accelerationism, or EL. It also redefines failure. It argues that every joule of energy left untapped, every technology left on the shelf because of caution.
That's a betrayal of our cosmic purpose.
Precisely. They frame our current era, what's often called the Great Stagnation, not as an economic problem, but as a civilizational suicide pact, one that's rooted in a deep-seated fear of technological progress itself.
That's an incredibly aggressive stance. It flips the whole precautionary principle on its head. The risk isn't moving too fast. The real risk is moving too slowly.
Exactly. They insist that we have to evaluate human progress not by GDP or social metrics, but by the Kardashev scale,
which measures a civilization's total energy utilization.
Correct. Right now, we are a Type 0 civilization. We use a tiny fraction of the energy that even hits our planet from the sun. A Type I civilization, which is their immediate goal, has to harness the total energy output of its home planet.
This, something like 100,000 times our current global energy usage? A staggering number.
It is. And their view is that the main obstacle to reaching Type I isn't technology. It's not a lack of know-how. It's institutional paralysis.
It's bureaucracy.
Absolutely. They argue the current trajectory is fatally hindered by what they call the cost disease of the spirit, perpetuated by regulatory delay and this deep cultural risk aversion. They've even formalized it. They have an equation.
An equation for civilizational progress.
Yes. Civilization progress is proportional to the log of the total energy capture rate, divided by regulatory delay times a risk aversion coefficient.
So all the blame for stagnation is placed squarely on the denominator. It's not the technical challenge of capturing energy. It's the bureaucratic inertia and the cultural fear holding us back.
The implication is profound, and it's the ideological engine for this entire movement. The problem isn't that we don't know how to engineer advanced nuclear reactors. The problem is that the systems governing us, the regulators, the utilities, the safety frameworks, won't let us build them fast enough.
And that's the collision point. That's where this whole movement smashes right into the AI safety discussion. The idea of regulating ethics or bias in an AI model just seems quaint, irrelevant even when you're faced with the physical reality of a gigawatt-scale machine.
There's a definite fatigue among some of these technologists with the hypothetical AI doom scenarios. A real shift away from the rhetoric of figures who champion alignment, people like Eliezer Yudkowsky. The focus is now on hard-nosed, pragmatic engineering, on energy sovereignty.
The accelerationist camp tends to dismiss those concerns as basically Luddism, anti-technology. They argue that the real risk is stagnation itself, failing to capture the energy we need to survive.
For them, the alignment debates are a distraction from the urgent physical need for raw power. The only safety measure that matters now is speed.
Which brings us back to that chilling black hole analogy. If you have a gigawatt-scale cluster with its own dedicated, physically secured nuclear core, it's not a data center anymore. It becomes a sovereign jurisdiction.
This is the ultimate ideological move. The energy source is the computing territory. It's physically secured. It's vertically integrated. It's completely outside the public utility structure. So any regulations designed to target grid-dependent resources, they just can't touch it.
The only way to influence it is to physically attack the facility. You can't just send a cease and desist letter. You've created a private technological ecosystem that is unaddressable by external policy. It's technological secession.
And you can see this urgency reflected in the anecdotes. There's the story of Kai, a researcher at one of these new gigawatt-scale AI facilities. He describes the air inside as charged. Energy isn't a utility bill. It's the raw material of evolution.
Kai sees the transition to a post-scarcity society as a physical, inevitable outcome. It's driven by a feedback loop. More energy from SMRs lets the AI solve the very problems that limit expansion. Problems in material science and logistics, creating what he calls a fusion of intent.
This really reflects that ache optimism, the belief that thriving on more energy is the answer. It fundamentally challenges that older cautionary idea of just surviving on less through conservation.
So the philosophy demands it, and the AI models. They literally require it, starting now. Which brings us crashing down to the ground-level reality. The philosophy is soaring, but the immediate problem is brutal. AI is devouring power at a scale never imagined. Projects like OpenAI's Stargate, xAI's Colossus 2, they immediately signaled gigawatt-level power demands for a single cluster. The focus has shifted completely from clever algorithms to brute force physics, to massive amps.
This unprecedented scale means data centers are, by far, the fastest growing market for power. And it's not just about the volume of power. It's the quality of the power they demand. These AI facilities have needs that the legacy grid was never, ever designed to handle.
What are those specific non-negotiable requirements?
It's primarily two things: reliability and workload profile. Let's start with reliability. When you're running a training model that costs hundreds of millions of dollars and takes months to complete, an interruption is catastrophic. These facilities require extreme reliability. We're talking over 99.99% uptime.
Let's put that in perspective. 99.99% uptime means less than 52 minutes of total downtime in an entire year.
Exactly. And the traditional grid, for residential users, it might be closer to 99.9%.
Which sounds good, but that's over 8 hours of downtime a year.
Right. And that difference, hours versus minutes, is existential for an AI company.
Okay, so reliability is number one. What about the workload profile?
This is crucial. While the initial training of a model uses massive, sustained power, It's the inference stage that uses the most energy over time. Inference is the day-to-day running of trained models for users, and it accounts for 60 to 90% of the total AI energy usage at scale.
And what defines those inference workloads?
They're highly bursty and unpredictable. Imagine a huge language model that suddenly has to handle a global surge in queries, or a complex simulation that needs instantaneous parallel processing. The power demand spikes dramatically, unpredictably. You need a power infrastructure that can instantly adjust to those spikes while maintaining that 99.99% reliability.
The public grid, built for predictable factory and residential loads, it just can't do that.
It fails that test spectacularly, which leads directly to why these leaders are calling the grid a mediocre entropy trap. The volatility is unacceptable, and the speed of getting connected is glacial.
The grid can't guarantee fixed-price contracts, rapid deployment, or the schedules that industrial AI requires.
We saw a perfect chilling example of this fragility. The April 2025 Spain-Portugal blackout.
That wasn't just a regional inconvenience, it was a systemic collapse.
Not at all. It was a cascading event. It affected 50 million people. It resulted in the loss of 15 gigawatts of generation. 60% of the regional demand just vanished. In 12 seconds, the human cost was real. 5 deaths linked to failed medical equipment, carbon monoxide poisoning from failed backup generators.
And the economic cost.
Estimated between 2 and 4 billion euros. But look at the industrial impact, which is what's driving this AI decision-making. Facilities had equipment damage. Production lines in energy-heavy sectors. Oil refineries, chemical plants. They took a week or more to fully restart.
For a business whose main asset is 247 computation, that kind of volatility is a catastrophic failure mode. It's not an option.
And it's not just about volatility. It's about availability. If you decide today you want to build a 1 gigawatt AI facility, how long does the traditional grid take to hook you up?
In North America, the wait times are getting longer and longer.
Exactly. Limited grid access. And the lead times for utility-scale equipment, like a large gas turbine for backup power, can be up to 7 years.
You can't plan an AI company on a 7-year timeline for a power connection.
You can't. The engineering necessity demands a sovereign solution, one that's deployable quickly, is hyper-reliable, and provides dense power right where it's needed.
This is why nuclear, and specifically small modular reactors, became the default, inevitable answer. It's a technology whose characteristics are almost perfectly matched to AI's extreme needs.
We can actually quantify that compatibility. First, just look at performance. Nuclear operates at a standard capacity factor of 92%.
Capacity factor being the ratio of actual power generated versus its maximum possible output.
Correct, 92%. The next closest is geothermal at around 65%. Natural gas is around 60%. This sheer uptime capability is the first essential match for those 99.999% reliability demands. It is always on.
So on reliability, nuclear wins by a landslide. What about the physical footprint, the density?
That's the second critical attribute, superior power density. If you're building a compute fortress, you want maximum power on minimal land. The data shows an incredible 57,000 megawatt hours per year per acre for nuclear.
How does that compare to, say, solar?
It's not even close.
Yeah.
Solar, when you account for the necessary spacing between panels, gives you about 200 megawatt hours per year per acre.
So you'd need a footprint hundreds of times larger to get the same power.
Which makes nuclear absolutely ideal for brownfield sites. Old coal plants, abandoned steel mills, places where land is constrained but infrastructure, like water access, already exists.
Then the SMR design, being modular, solves the maintenance problem of traditional large plants.
Exactly. You don't build one massive monolithic plant. You build several smaller standardized units side by side. This allows you to stagger refueling and maintenance. If one unit is offline, the others keep operating. It minimizes downtime and ensures that systemic reliability that AI must have.
And the third piece, the one that appeals to heavy industry beyond just data centers, is the heat.
That's a huge factor. Many advanced SMR designs are optimized not just for electricity, but for providing high-temperature process heat, up to 750 degrees Celsius. This opens up massive opportunities for cogeneration. Producing both electricity and usable heat can improve overall energy efficiencies by up to 40% in sectors like chemicals, fertilizer production, refining.
So the need is driven by the AI catastrophe, this huge energy demand. And the solution is dictated by the physics of nuclear energy. High reliability, extreme density, and flexibility through heat.
The physics matches the need perfectly. The next question becomes, can we scale it fast enough?
And that's the big leap. We're talking about shifting from current trends that project only about 7 gigawatts of SMR capacity by 2050 to an achievable market opportunity of nearly 700 gigawatts. To be clear, 700 gigawatts is about 2,300 reactors of 300 megawatt capacity. That's almost double the entire current global nuclear capacity.
This is the definition of the great decoupling. And this jump, this 100-fold increase, isn't driven by some new technology. It's driven entirely by transforming nuclear delivery from a unique, bespoke construction project into a standardized, mass-manufactured product.
We can visualize this scaling through 4 different supply scenarios. Each one depends on how we tackle the regulatory and manufacturing hurdles.
The current scenario is what gets us that baseline 7 gigawatts. It's the traditional model, bespoke, on-site construction. High, unpredictable costs, around $125 per megawatt hour, and slow 10-plus year timelines.
That model fails to meet any industrial business requirement for speed or price.
Completely. The first step up is the programmatic scenario. That projects about 120 gigawatts. This involves standardized construction, maybe some government support. It gets timelines down to a more manageable 5 to 7 years. Costs might drop a bit to maybe $90 to $125 per megawatt hour. A big improvement, but still based on slow, traditional methods.
Now, the breakout scenario, this is where the delivery model fundamentally transforms. This yields 347 gigawatts.
This is the critical inflection point. The breakout scenario leverages existing world-class shipyard manufacturing capabilities. You shift construction off-site, you build standardized power plant products, mostly complete, and deliver them to the site.
That must compress timelines dramatically.
It does. Delivery in just 2 to 3 years. And that scale slashes costs. It drops them down to the $60 to $90 per megawatt hour range.
Which opens it up to a much broader industrial market.
Yes. But the ultimate goal, the one that unlocks the full 700 gigawatts, is the transformation scenario. The transformation scenario is the full re-engineering of the entire product line into a truly mass-manufactured product. This uses design for manufacturing and assembly, DF&A techniques. It turns the reactor from a civil engineering project into a factory product.
And the costs plummet.
They do, down to a highly competitive $40 to $60 per megawatt hour. This is the magic number.
Why is $40 to $60 the magic number?
Because at that price point, nuclear becomes competitive with, and often cheaper than, natural gas plants and even heavily subsidized utility-scale solar. When you hit that price, the superior reliability, that 92% capacity factor, it's essentially a free bonus. Deployment is measured in months, not years. And that unlocks the full trillion-dollar opportunity.
So who are the customers with the scale and urgency to drive this? It's not residential utility customers anymore.
Not at all. About 80% of the current SMR pipeline is being driven by these non-traditional large industrial users. And that 700 gigawatt market is dominated by 5 key sectors. They represent over 75% of the entire potential market.
Let's start with the biggest long-term vision, synthetic aviation fuels.
That's the single largest opportunity, accounting for 203 gigawatts. Aviation is one of the hardest sectors to decarbonize. Batteries are too heavy for long-haul flights. So synthetic kerosene, a drop-in fuel, is the main pathway.
And producing that requires a massive amount of clean electricity for hydrogen production.
Massive, constant baseload power. SMRs are the perfect fit. This market really accelerates after 2035 once SMR costs hit that transformative range.
Okay, next, a key near-term driver that solves both a power and a land problem. Coal repowering.
110 gigawatts here. Repurposing retired coal plant sites is a brilliant strategy. These sites already have critical infrastructure, grid connections, cooling water access, a trained workforce.
And importantly, community acceptance of a power plant being there.
Exactly. Using these brownfield sites streamlines everything. It can reduce total SMR investment costs by up to 35%. This is a critical near-term driver for proving the model, like what TerraPower is doing with their Nitrium project.
Then we have synthetic maritime fuels. This is driven by ironclad global mandates.
90 gigawatts. The International Maritime Organization's Net Zero by 2050 mandate creates intense, non-negotiable demand. SMRs will power large-scale production of ammonia or methanol at major port facilities. We should also note that direct nuclear propulsion for the biggest ships is a secondary pathway, about 30 gigawatts.
And now the catalyst, the sector providing the immediate high-paying demand. Data centers.
The 75 gigawatt data center market is the absolute catalyst for this entire shift. AI computing needs concentrated, extremely reliable power, and these companies are already used to paying premium prices, often over $100 per megawatt hour, for that reliability.
They don't need the price to drop to $40, they just need it to work, and they need it now.
Their urgency is what's driving the initial scale-up of SMR manufacturing, improving the colocation model.
Finally, chemicals, the sector that benefits most from the cogeneration advantage.
55 gigawatts here. The chemical industry needs both reliable electricity and high-temperature process heat. Because SMRs can provide both, the efficiencies are huge. It makes them highly valuable. Plus, this industry already has a culture of complex safety management. They handle volatile materials. It makes adopting nuclear technology an easier transition.
This market shift is already creating physical territories of energy independence. This concept of the sovereign compute zone, it's no longer defined by national borders. It's defined by the fence between the private cluster and the public grid.
We're seeing high-profile concrete partnerships forming these zones right now.
Yeah.
Amazon securing 5 gigawatts from X-Energy, Google partnering with Kairos Power for 500 megawatts, and that landmark 12-gigawatt agreement between Oklo and Switch.
These are not just power purchase agreements. These companies are building physical, secured territories. They're ensuring their AI ambitions aren't hostage to the political whims of public utility commissions.
It's the great decoupling in action. It takes that philosophical urgency and grounds it in a physical location.
Think about the story of Elias, the technician in the Appalachians. He watched his local public grid fail with seasonal brownouts, a decaying system not built for modern demands.
But then, a few miles away, behind a high-tensile fence at an old steel mill, he saw the blue glow of a cluster of 3D-printed SMRs. He called that sovereign compute zone an island of order in a sea of entropy.
That perspective is vital. It explains the ideological drive perfectly. We might see these private zones and think of exclusion, but the builders see them as a necessary reaction.
A reaction to the profound failure of centralized systems to provide a non-negotiable function like 99.99% uptime.
They're building something that simply works.
The drive is simple. Secure the power, secure the future. Achieve energy superabundance without waiting for permission. Which brings us straight to the regulatory battlefield, where this pushback is most aggressive.
The path from 7 gigawatts to 700 isn't just about technology. It's about changing 6 critical, non-technical market drivers that are locking up the potential. These are the bureaucratic inertia points, the denominator in that civilization progress equation.
And all 6 have to improve simultaneously. If any one of them lags, the 700 gigawatt transformation scenario just remains a dream.
Let's walk through the 6 barriers that need to be dismantled.
First is delivery innovation. The challenge is moving away from that expensive, inefficient on-site construction model. This means adopting product-based manufacturing, shipyards, mass manufacturing facilities, achieving the cost and speed that utilities could never imagine.
Second, and maybe the biggest hurdle, is regulatory evolution.
We have to shift from lengthy, site-by-site licensing, treating every reactor as a unique project, to product-based licensing. It's type approval, like the FAA does for an aircraft model. The core design is approved once, and then subsequent identical units are expedited.
Third is the money, economic viability. Until the cost hits that $40 to $60 target, it needs some help.
Correct. We need policies that properly value clean, firm power. That means valuing dispatchability, weather independence, on-site fuel, all attributes that renewables often lack. A policy premium for these features bridges the cost gap with natural gas and helps accelerate the learning curve.
Now for the logistics, site availability and capital access.
Fourth is site availability. Finding a site and getting environmental approval can take years. The solution is moving to hundreds of pre-qualified sites.
Pre-approving all retired coal plant sites for nuclear conversion, for example.
Exactly. It eliminates years from project timelines. It's an administrative shortcut. Fifth is capital access. Nuclear has historically required massive, decade-long government loans. The transition requires moving financing away from government programs and toward mainstream private capital at standard infrastructure rates.
And finally, number 6 is maturing the developer ecosystem.
This just means building a competitive supplier base. We need multiple companies with proven track records, not just one or two. That competition is what drives down costs and enables the deployment rate we need over 50 gigawatts annually to hit that 700 gigawatt target.
It's clear the industry is pushing back hard on this bureaucratic inertia. This is a collision between the old world of caution and the new world of absolute necessity.
The political landscape is responding directly to the sheer energy demands of AI. We've seen key government actions that signal this profound shift toward deregulation and acceleration.
That FERC collocation ruling in late 2025 was a landmark decision, wasn't it? It fundamentally changed the game.
Absolutely. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's ruling allowed data centers to be physically co-located with nuclear plants as a single integrated system. It's a crucial deregulatory move. It allows developers to bypass the legacy grid distribution and its bureaucratic allocation processes.
It legally recognizes that high-density compute and baseload nuclear are one unified system.
Exactly. It came after initial pushback on agreements like the one between Amazon and Telan Energy's Susquehanna plant. FERC stepped in and said, yes, they can do this.
It validates the entire compute fortress model.
We also saw a significant action from the executive branch. The Trump administration issued executive orders in May 2025 to accelerate advanced nuclear development.
Specifically targeting that site availability problem.
Precisely. The EOs ordered the reform of the NRC to streamline product-based licensing, and they actively sought industry interest in using 16 Department of Energy sites as potential locations for data centers powered by nuclear reactors.
That's the government actively preparing and pre-qualifying sites.
And none of this works without the specialized fuel these new reactors need. Which brings us to HALEU, high-assay, low-enriched uranium.
It's a richer fuel that allows for smaller, more efficient reactor designs.
Correct. More compact cores and, crucially, longer refueling cycles, which means more uptime. But producing it has been a bottleneck, which is why the government has made strategic investments. $2.7 billion in FY24 appropriations, $800 million from the IRA. It's a recognition that fuel security is deployment security.
This bureaucratic resistance, this denominator in the progress equation, it has a real cost. The manifestos call it safetyism. They define it as the phenomenon where the fear of a tiny marginal risk becomes the greatest risk of all, leading to total stagnation.
It's not just risk aversion. It's a cultural pathology where bureaucratic compliance becomes the goal, overriding the original purpose, which was to generate reliable power. The story of Sarah, the nuclear engineer, illustrates this perfectly.
She spent 15 years trapped in what she called the paper graveyard of regulatory compliance.
She was standing in the empty control room of perfectly functional, but legally forbidden decommissioned reactor. The sheer weight of that paralysis, that safetyism, prevented her from generating a single watt.
Until a private AI firm, desperate for power, bought the site and used the new collocation loophole.
She described the moment they restarted the heart of the reactor as a religious experience. For the first time in her career, the engineering was faster than the auditing.
And that's the ultimate ideological defense. This movement isn't reckless. It's a defense mechanism against a system that has forgotten how to build.
The pursuit of speed is seen not as a threat to safety, but as a necessary defense against systemic regulatory failure.
So the convergence is now complete. AI is driving the demand, SMRs provide the supply, and regulation is being bypassed. This leads to a clear future architecture, the compute fortress.
These are privately owned, privately operated gigawatt-scale clusters fused with SMRs or restarted nuclear plants. They represent the ultimate realization of energy sovereignty, where the ideological drive meets physical, vertically integrated infrastructure.
And the clearest example of this logic is Elon Musk's strategy for xAI.
His plan to establish a dedicated 1 gigawatt power station in Mississippi is described as the purest expression of this logic. It's vertical integration applied to the most fundamental layer of reality, energy. By owning the power plant, you control the destiny of the compute.
And the mantra driving this approach is stark and unambiguous. Code is speech. Electricity is ammunition.
That signifies that controlling the means of energy production is controlling the intelligence itself. You can't argue about the code. You have to target the power supply. This architecture just bypasses the debate about AI ethics or bias. The jurisdiction is sovereign. It answers only to the laws of physics.
Let's just reiterate the sheer technical compatibility here. The reason this 700 gigawatt market is even plausible.
SMRs are adaptable enough to meet over 80% of industrial energy demand. It's a perfect technical marriage across 3 factors. First, flexibility and scale. SMR designs are modular. They can be tiny microreactors or gang together for gigawatt-scale data centers.
They can be precisely matched to any facility's needs.
Second, temperature compatibility. Industrial heat is a huge energy demand. Most of that demand falls below the 750 degrees Celsius temperature that advanced SMRs can provide. This makes sectors like chemicals and refining highly viable markets for combined heat and power, which improves the economics dramatically.
And finally, the future evolution of other heavy industries is lining up perfectly.
Exactly. This is technical potential evolution. As sectors like steel and oil and gas become more electrified or shift to hydrogen,
which SMRs can produce on-site.
the market potential only increases.
Yeah.
This 700 gigawatt opportunity is not speculative. It's based on a logical progression of industrial energy use.
So if this terrestrial decoupling, building these compute fortresses on Earth, is just the near-term phase, where does this obsession with total energy capture ultimately lead?
The midterm future extends the logic into space. This is the fulfillment of the Type I civilization goal, the ultimate collocation. Massive space-based solar arrays, or lunar helium-3 mining operations, powering zero-gravity data centers.
The success of reusable launch systems changes the equation from energy scarcity to purely material logistics.
The final step of the thermodynamic imperative is cosmic expansion. Ensuring intelligence is not bottlenecked by terrestrial constraints.
These terrestrial compute fortresses are just the factory floor, the launch pad for that long-term goal of total cosmic energy capture. What we've seen today is the great decoupling happening in real time. The world's most powerful technological forces are choosing energy sovereignty over grid dependency. They're transforming nuclear power from a monolithic, slow utility service into a mass-manufactured, vertically integrated product.
This is the transformation of the nuclear delivery model, moving from bespoke construction to that transformation scenario. It's what unlocks 700 gigawatts of capacity by optimizing every critical market driver. And the data center industry, needing absolute reliability and speed, is the central catalyst for this $1.5 trillion shift.
The narrative has shifted completely. We've moved from a theoretical debate about AI alignment to the practical, physical reality of building energy infrastructure. Infrastructure that answers to no political or regulatory authority, only to the laws of physics. The strategic integration of SMRs isn't just an energy solution. It's an act of infrastructural secession that defines a new kind of technological sovereignty.
The foundation for this post-scarcity society is being laid not by appealing to consensus or solving regulatory problems, but by building a way to bypass them entirely, making technological expansion an act of physical inevitability.